Hey there, it's Dr. Maya. Just making a quick video today to share a great example that I got from one of my real life students in Introduction to Sociology of a current event analysis paper that was assigned in this course. I wanted to share this just to give an example of somebody who did a really great job. So if you are looking to improve your writing or figure out what I meant by a certain comment, this would be a great video to watch. Now, as you see on your screen here, this is a Turnitin document viewer. This is the Turnitin website that nearly all of the assignments that I ever do are turned in through. And this is what I use to grade it. So this is the view that I see when you turn in your papers. And I'm just going to go through and read this paper for you and talk about some of the comments that I make and why this is a great example of meeting the assignments requirements. The writing is pretty good. Just want to share this with you as an example to work towards. So here we go. The role of LGBT athletes in sports today. Now, I did put a comment here that the title could be a little more specific, a little more creative, but that isn't that big of a deal, so let's move on. The past several years has seen an increasing number of athletes in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender (LGBT) community publicly announce their sexual orientation or gender self-identity. Historically, athletes typically came out after their careers were over, if at all, but in recent years, several major sport athletes have announced their sexual orientation during their careers. Michael Sam, an NFL prospect, came out as gay in 2014, prior to entering the NFL draft after college. It was revealed that he had disclosed his sexual orientation to teammates in college well before, and that they had been very accepting of him. Earlier this year, Bruce Jenner, a former Olympic athlete, announced that he was transgender. Jason Collins, a major basketball player in the NBA, a basketball player in the NBA, announced he was gay in 2013, becoming the first U.S. major sport athlete to do so during his playing career. So I did advise that citing some sources for the news on these would be great, because this is sort of saying that you know this out of your own mind. And so if you were to be a little more proper, you would actually put some citations here, and we can get into that a little farther down in the paper. I put down great start so far. There's a few things I would tweak here, like maybe I would put these events in order, not jumping from 2014 to 2015 to 2013, maybe put them in order. But overall, this is a good start. As you can tell, as I'm reading it, it flows well and gives us an idea of what we're going to be talking about with the paper. So let's move on. Our society in the United States has begun to become more accepting of the LGBT community than it has in the past. In a survey of LGBT Americans, 92% say that society has become more accepting of the LGBT community in the last decade. Pew Research Center, 2013, page 32. This is the exact correct way to cite a source in your text. If it is by a known author, let's say I wrote something, so my last name is Wells, you would put Wells 2013-32. Although sports are a part of society, these social transitions may happen more slowly due to the culture of sports itself. Now here I put comma because this is something that we want to try to do to improve the quality of our writing. When you make a statement like this, you're setting up an argument for your paper. An argument should always have a because. So I'd like this sentence to say, although sports are a part of society, these social transitions may happen more slowly due to the culture of sports itself. Because, and then add, there's a culture that's specific to sports that's more masculine, or there's something about sports that you're trying to argue in your paper that makes this type of transition happen more slowly. Okay, let's move on. Young athletes in particular tend to hide their sexual orientation, as studies showed. There we have a little proofreading error, but overall this is good, so it still gets an A. Young athletes in particular tend to hide their sexual orientation, as a study showed, perhaps we're trying to say here, or as Dennison 2015 showed. It may be better to put the actual author, which we see here, at that point in the sentence. Moving on. The study showed that 81% of gay men and 74% of lesbians who were under 22 at the time of the study reported being completely or partially in the closet to teammates while playing youth sports. Again, we have the correct citation format here. Researchers that have focused on issues for gay athletes in sports largely agree that organized sports are a highly homophobic institution. And again, we say because maybe there's something that you found in this research that you could put here as a detail. Now, one of the things that I would point out is that we need a page number here. If you're quoting something directly, it needs to have the page number. So that would be maybe an oversight in the proofreading process. Again, we're seeing proofreading issues here. Now, one thing I want to point out that makes this style of writing sophisticated for this particular author is this is a great way to really make your writing flow better. You don't have to quote the entire sentence all the time. You can start with your own sentence here like this person did. Researchers that have focused on issues for gay athletes in sports, quote, largely agree that blah, blah, blah. So you can take partial quotes and really weave it in with your own writing in a way that makes that flow a lot more sophisticated. Great job here. These issues that are unique to sports as a culture have proven difficult to overcome even in a world where political correctness is often required. In an interview with the Tampa Tribune, former NFL coach and current NBC sports analyst Tony Dungy offered a personal opinion regarding Michael Sam that gives insight to the issues of gays in sports. I wouldn't have taken him in the NFL draft, not because I don't believe Michael Sam should have a chance to play, but I wouldn't want to deal with all of it. Now, we don't need a page number necessarily because this is actually citing, I think, an online source if we go down. We always want to try to have a page number here. This is a good detail because it brings out a nuance of the issue that people aren't saying that it's, not okay to be gay and play sports. It's just a lot of political and PR type issues that end up coming up, and this person's illustrating that. So it's a great quote to choose to provide a little bit of detail. So moving along, one just really, really quick thing. If you're putting your own words, as this person is here, into a quote, it's totally okay to do that to provide some clarity, which is the function of this phrase here. But we would put the squared off brackets here instead of the normal parentheses. That's just a little side note for you guys. But when we're doing that, we put the brackets. Okay, and so I said good detail. Now we move on. We say functionalist analysis maintains that society is a group of interrelated parts that function as a whole unit. Now before I move on, I put here, it's a weak transition. We're jumping right from this quote, this really great detail, into functionalism. It's like a little jarring. So we want our writing to always flow very naturally. So we want to maybe have one more sentence here that leads us into the idea of functionalism. So this is just a little bit of a weak transition. It's too abrupt. Functionalist analysis, I would probably just say functionalism, but that's okay. Functionalist analysis, it's just a little cumbersome. Maintains that society is a group of interrelated parts that function as a whole unit, similar to the way the body is comprised of many parts that make up the whole body. Now, that's another thing where it's like body. Maybe reading your work out loud as I'm doing now will bring up some of these tiny things that you can change to make it even better. But again, we can see that the flow overall and the word choice overall is pretty great in this paper. So it's still good. Each interrelated part serves to stabilize or maintain a balance or equilibrium. Sports can be viewed as one of those interrelated parts as it serves to influence personal and social development. Functionalists would view sports as a stable institution that promotes, and maintains, because sports is a singular subject, and so that's how we would do these verbs here. That's a small grammar note. Promotes and maintains values and order in terms of social order. Again, we see order, body. So just making sure that we proofread is a really important thing. One flaw of this theory in regards to sports might be that it does not account for how sports can be unfair to certain groups and how it can actually promote division between groups. Now, I would love to see this person go a little deeper here, bring back the idea of LGBT players coming out, and what would functionalists say specifically about that? Now, again, we go a little abruptly into conflict theory. I would like to have a transition. We always need to transition between ideas. This idea of good transitions will improve your writing so much. So as you're writing, just think about, how am I going to get to that next idea? How can I link these two things together? So instead of just going, boom, conflict theorists would view the role of sports, let's make a transition. Conflict theorists would view the role of sports in society much differently. Conflict theory assumes that behavior in social terms results from competition among groups, which leads to inequalities among those groups. This view appears to apply rather well when it comes to the analysis of LGBT athletes in their respective sports. If an athlete's role within a sport is compromised or hindered by an issue such as their sexual orientation, then it will surely lead to more inequality within that group. Because, now I'm just kind of reading this now, but I'd like to see a because here. Again, this is getting a little deeper with all of these points to really provide a solid argument. The impacts could be a denial of competitive opportunities, salaries, and other inequalities that conflict theorists emphasize. Power now is a huge part of conflict theory, and I would like to know how that relates to the situation. How can you really apply all parts of the theory to the example that you're giving? A potential flaw of this theory could be that it does not recognize the potential empowerment and sense of self-worth that sport may provide. In reality, an athlete might also be accepted simply due to their outstanding athleticism. This may provide athletes a chance to allow people to understand that sexual orientation has nothing to do with sporting ability and therefore promote tolerance. Again, a weak transition into symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interaction theory focuses on social interaction and the symbolic meaning that results from those interactions. Again, we're repeating words in the same sentence. We want to try to avoid that. Maybe results from those face-to-face meetings, something like that. We can think of a different word here. People use socially constructed meanings or views of issues like sexual orientation to help to decide with whom they will socially interact. This seems to play negatively into the role of an LBGT athlete in sports. And then we would just put a period and capitalize this. It doesn't need to be a semicolon. If this argument is true, it is likely that athletes would remain divided by gender, race, and sexual identities. Over time, like marriage and divorce and influencing symbols, now this is a little awkward of a way to write this, so I may suggest kind of redoing this sentence here, but let's just keep going. Over time, like marriage and divorce and influencing symbols, it is possible to see a change in attitude and views regarding LGBT athletes. A really quick note, this type of citation goes at the end of the sentence right before the period. A major downside of this theory is that it does not account for the larger picture of society as a whole and does not take into account the broader influences that may play a role on the acceptance of LGBT athletes and other groups. Okay, just an overall comment right now. As this person is going through each of the theories that he or she is applying to these examples, the person is also saying what may be a weakness of that application of theory, and that's setting us up for this part here, which is coming to the conclusion. So that's a really good thing to do, is kind of hint where you're going and say, this theory applies in this way, but here's the weakness that it may have. The second theory applies in these other ways, and here's a weakness that may have. Now that's leading us up to the point where the person's going to say which theory is best, or what combination of theories might be used best to explain this phenomenon. Of the three perspectives and how they relate to the acceptance of LGBT athletes in sports, functional analysis seems to be the theory that fits an application the best in terms of gradual acceptance and tolerance. Again, when we're reading this out loud, we see that I kind of stumble a little bit over that construction. It's a little bit cumbersome. Again, that's just very small tweaks in the way that we proofread our writing and the way that we edit our writing that just makes it get better and better and more smooth. So this is just taking a great paper and making it even better. It seems that as society's norms evolve toward acceptance, sports might follow suit. The groundbreaking athletes who proudly announce their sexual orientations or self-identities may actually in turn provide a catalyst for further acceptance in society on the whole. Under symbolic interactionist theory and conflict theory, this tolerance and acceptance appears to be hindered simply by the notion that the perception of diversity, we missed an of here, will likely be a negative or impact equality. Now this is a little bit confusing. I think I would like to see a little more detail here about why. This is part of a reaction to those becauses that were left hanging in some of these places in the paper. There's just a little bit more that could be said here. And so I'm trying to push my students, especially in introductory sociology, because a lot of you are just entering the college experience or taking a class here or there to advance professionally or what have you. And there's some of these things that just really haven't been told yet. So it's really about diving into the nitty gritty of the because statements. And so when we get to this part, I'm kind of feeling like, why is it negative? Why is it necessarily negative here? I didn't really quite get that part of the argument. And so when we get here, I'm left hanging just a little bit. So I would suggest trying to, if there was an edit to this paper, this person would go back and maybe try to make this part more clear instead of just sort of dumping it into the conclusion. Sports have their own distinct roles and norms which will likely negatively impact the progress regardless of viewpoint. But functionalist theory and the role that sports plays in a larger society would appear to promote acceptance better than the other theories discussed. Again, I'm just craving more detail here. I think this conclusion could have gone a little bit farther. I think that we need to talk a little bit more about how functionalism views this one institution of sports as part of a larger functioning society. This person had great ideas about how sports promotes acceptance and self-worth and those types of things, and how that can actually flow back into society from the functionalist point of view to create more productive members of society that help society to maintain equilibrium across other social institutions, like school, for example, or the workplace, for example, or even government. Though that one more sentence or one more idea would have really pushed this paper over the edge into being a phenomenal, perfect paper.